and we'll let in the Zoom audience here. And I'm just going to start a local recording as well, in case something happens. One time we did get cut off. Hello, everyone on YouTube. We're now streaming live on CCTV, and we've got a local audience coming in on Zoom here. Just going to wait a moment till everyone has a chance to log in. Zoom is a little slow on that uptake sometimes. It takes a few seconds or as much as 30 seconds. See lots of familiar names coming into the Zoom room here with us today on the Friday webinar. Welcome to everyone and thanks for joining us. And I'm just going to check one more CCTV thing. And we've got a local audience coming. Mute myself on the YouTube channel. I always forget that till just before it starts doing that double thing on me. Okay, everyone, welcome to the Friday webinar. I'm the Executive Director with Conservatory Canada, Derek Auger. We do this pretty much every Friday. We've taken a couple of Fridays off lately for holidays and March break and stuff like that. But we have a full slate of webinars from here now until the end of May, where we'll break for the summer, let ourselves get into exams and other things that we like to do. I hear from studio teachers more and more all the time that they like to take the month of June off, which is really great. I try to do that myself with my small teaching studio that I try to stay in touch with teaching with. And today we have Debra Wanless joining us here from Wanless Publishing. I'm going to let her talk a little bit about Wanless Publishing and what has changed there over the last few months. It's been kind of a quiet change, but very significant, where Deb is stepping back into retirement. Before we get into that, the upcoming schedule, you will have noticed probably in your inbox. I'm going to take this seat next Friday here and talk with everyone about neurodiverse students and teaching neurodiverse students. It's a topic I used to dive into about 10 years ago with an ORM2 workshop that I used to give throughout Ontario. At that time, I called it something different. But I'm just going to share some general ideas and things. I've had my share of neurodiverse students and in taking on new beginners lately this past year. Was quickly reminded of how this works now, studio teaching, and what we have to be aware of and how we have to change and adapt our methods so quickly every 30 minutes. It's been really interesting. So I'm going to share a few ideas there. I hope you'll join me live and ask a bunch of questions, and we can start a very interesting discussion about that. And then the week after that, on Friday, April 28th, Deborah's going to come back and talk to us and give us part 2 of her Let's Begin series. And I'm sure you can see it all on the screen here now. I'm going to put a link in the chat box to Deb's handout so that you all have it. You can refer to it if you're not seeing it on the screen or you want to look at it externally. I'm going to keep putting that in the chat box. If anyone joins late, they're not going to be able to see that initial link. And so I'll keep putting that in there. If you click on that link, you're going to get a link to this handout. I see Andrew Harbridge here. Hello from Peterborough in the chat. Please, anyone, just type in the chat box, where are you joining us in from today? We haven't done that for a while, and that's a great thing to do to help connect us across this vast land of ours. And so I'm going to turn things over to Deb. The first question before we get into Let's Begin is Deb, an announcement that there's been, a change at Wanless Music as you head into retirement, and I'd like you just to give, for our audience, so that they understand what's happening and what your role in the company is and where things are heading.
Yeah, we've had some exciting changes, I think. My husband and I worked really hard to build Debra Wanless Music. And so as we wanted to ensure there would be a succession plan, we started looking for people that we felt would be perfect for taking over management and taking over the company and running it into the future. And so we are really excited to say that Andrew Harbridge and Carissa Harbridge are now running the company, and we'll take ownership of the company as we go forward. And they have great plans. We did a really soft transition so that we could help as much as we needed to, and they've just done a fantastic job to pick it up. Carissa created the new website, and they're already producing new books. We continue to work with 80 Days Publishing out of UK, which of course is the Christopher Norton Connection books as well. And so it's just been a really exciting time, and I'm just so pleased to feel like our company is going to have a future going forward. We've grown the company to become the largest number of composers, Canadian and other composers, but largely Canadian composers in the country. So it's already expanding in the time that Andrew and Carissa have been working in it, which was just from January 1st. So I'm just really delighted to make this announcement, and I'm excited to see what they're going to do with the company going forward.
Awesome to hear. That's really great news. I'm glad that you're getting to step back, and also stepping back from CNCM, I understand, in time here over the next few months.
Yes.
So about the webinar today, then, one of the things we've been trying to do over the last few months since January is to hold a series of webinars aimed at teaching beginner piano. And this is part of that series, looking at different beginner methods. And this is the first beginner method that we're going to feature in depth. We'll have Eleanor Gummer from Piano Kids, One Eye Publishing. We've had Eleanor on many times. She's going to come on at the end of May, probably in the last slot, to talk about her beginner series. And so I hope you'll all enjoy this. You'll find the replay for anyone listening later of all of these webinars in a dedicated playlist on CCTV that's dedicated to teaching beginner piano, and that's where you'll find this and others in that series. So Deb, thanks for joining us today. We're going to go for about an hour today, everyone, till the top of the hour. Again, I'm going to put a link to the handout that Deb is presenting in the chat box for you to download now if you would like. And it'll also be in the show notes later on YouTube, those of you watching us later on. Thanks for being here, Deb. We'll turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Derek. Welcome, everyone. I had a bit of a virus, so hoping my voice holds out for the duration, but I'll try not to cough or be too croaky as we go. Let's Begin is a series that I first started producing when I was editing the Little Fletcher books, and they didn't have any type of primer with them. And so the original Let's Begin A was designed to be able to take a student from pre-reading to being able to access the Little Fletcher. But once I took back all of my products and copyrights, I've completed the series. It's a 4-book series, and we're going to look today strictly at level 1, talk about my philosophies and approaches, and then we can finish that in the next session that we do. The handout, pages 1 through 5, will give you all of this preamble with the quotes and everything, so you have a chance to go back through those later. And then we'll jump in and just kind of zoom through the level 1 with talking about my philosophies and approaches. And so I really love quotes, and this one is especially important to me when I found it. Doesn't it make sense that we should understand how children learn before we decide how we're going to teach them? The Let's Begin series is a 4-book series, and it really is not only designed to look at, okay, what comes next, what's progressive, what do we want to accomplish, but having studied learning styles for many years now, it really is designed that every page touches on as many learning styles or sensory modalities as possible. We know that children who learn through their preferred learning style while stimulating less natural skills learn more quickly and more easily. Scientists now believe that children have developed 50% of their brain's capacity by age 6. And although children have billions of brain cells, educators must turn those cells into usable intelligence through creative experiences. And using one's preferred learning style while stimulating less natural ones and the brain leads to the development of neural bridges. And when these bridges are formed or strengthened, we literally connect the dots for all levels of learning. We can't assume that children will transfer information from one concept to another. Every dot needs to be touched by every student, regardless of how quickly they pace. So a child who's pacing quickly, be careful not to skip over pages in your method book, but rather touch every dot. Maybe you don't need to spend much time there, and perhaps you don't even have to assign anything on that page, but make sure you touch on that. Each concept must be clarified before moving to a new one. And finally, keeping those dots really close together is going to make progress much faster in the end. And of course, we have these really bright, gifted students that want to move more quickly than concepts will actually allow. We also need to be ready for these spontaneous teaching moments come into play every day. And a good teacher will seize these moments and make the most of them. So what that says to me is that we need to meet our children where they are on that given day. So their interests may change from week to week, and we need to be ready to embrace that. For example, you might have kids who are hockey crazy, and then all of a sudden it's a new something that comes along. But while you know that they're a hockey player, you want to use language that relates to that. You want to ask them questions about it. If they've played games, what can I use that would be valuable within their interests? And that's how you're going to keep them focused during your lessons. You definitely want to have a lesson plan even for these little people, but you need to be ready to adapt it in a nanosecond. If today they come in and they just want to sit on the floor, play some games, do some clapping, and then gradually draw them to the instrument. And above all, we want to really work on matching our language to each child and watch and learn as they grow. The methodology in Let's Begin is a non-staff, black keys moving to white keys, moving to middle C, and then we incorporate signpost and intervallic reading. And it has a limited number of supplemental materials. And one of the reasons for that is when we get into method books that have like 4 books to make sure you encompass everything that's required at that level, it can become really overwhelming for young children. It can be very cost prohibitive. And the supplemental material can be mixed and matched from other places as well for this series. So I think that was important to me, that we didn't just keep everything the same in 4 books. We did something a little bit different in that way. So in the beginning, you're looking at the A book, which is a landscape book, is typical of method books. If you're looking for something in a non-staff pre-reader, the Northern Lights has a pre-reader book, and it parallels the Let's Begin well, but it would also parallel any method book in that way. Don't give up on pre-reader material once they hit the staff. Once they hit the staff, it's really easy for them to get stuck in these positions, while pre-reader, non-staff reading allows them freedom to explore more of the keyboard. Pre-reading experiences should not only be considered as preparation for reading the staff, but they also, along with rote tunes and scale duets, should serve as an avenue for getting the musical process started, preparing the mind, body, and ear to think and do. So these experiences provide us with the opportunity to develop a strong sense of keyboard geography, which we know we're going to need down the road, building gross muscle, which is large muscle movement about the keyboard, hand designation, posture, and hand position. We can develop language, directional reading, experimentation, and creativity within these, hand and eye coordination, hand to page connection. And this is all can be accomplished before we move into staff reading. And it just simplifies the process, fewer things to actually think about. And in putting this together, I knew that I wanted to stimulate creativity. That was really important. I wanted to attract all dispositions, which I'll touch on in a minute. I especially wanted to teach to all sensory modalities. And for me, that was oral, visual, tactile, and kinesthetic. Many of the studies clump tactile and kinesthetic together. But if you think about the piano as an instrument, it does require fine motor skills, which is more of a tactile type of learning, while kinesthetic is this gross muscle, which we use, you know, if you think about the Chopin waltzes, we need a strong kinetic connection. And so I like to break them into these 4 categories rather than just 3 because of the instrument. And I live and breathe by teaching from the known to the unknown with dot-to-dot learning and from the inside out. The books developed keyboard geography, reading, rhythm, technique, oral components. The later books also include transposition, harmonization, vocalization, improvisation, and theory. So for me, it was creating a holistic program, not just a reading program. I just saw on one of the groups last night a teacher who had asked about a student who was highly audio and what to do. And we do want them to read, but the reality is we need to make sure that we're, again, connecting all the pieces of the pie. We don't want to just develop partial parts of the pie, but the entire pie. And that was a goal for me that was really important. It's individually paced, so it's easily used for very young children, as early as 4 use this, to 8 plus, depending on the maturity of the child. It's designed for group or private lessons and moves steadily and easily to Canadian conservatory systems. Here in Canada, we have these wonderful conservatory systems, but at workshops very early on, one of the predominant questions for beginners was, when do I transition to grade 1 material? And I realized that we were really inundated by international products that did not have the same conservatory systems that we have. That's problem number 1. I think it's so important to choose Canadian products that evolve or progress naturally to our conservatory systems. That way, it isn't a transition, it's a progression. And we know that all of the skills that would be expected to play any grade 1 piece have been put in place in a 4-book system, because the same is true. We don't want to start too late getting into conservatory programs. We don't know what these children want in the end. So you have to keep all of these doors open. So that was a really important part of the product that I wanted to create. It was really important to me that we get them off the bench and do whole body learning for large muscle building. And while we do lots of finger plays in book 1 for small muscle, that's really the first technique that you're giving these little people. Role playing, where the teacher becomes the student, and embracing that. Pre-teaching, knowing what's coming next, and then being able to prepare them away from the keyboard so that when we come to the keyboard, material has already been pre-taught. Lots of rhyming, lots of rhythm, and even encouraging memory. We have free downloadable accompaniment tracks, and you have the website in your handout. And not initially, but as the book A progresses, you're going to see the parent-teacher duets. I was also really conscious of the fact that I did not want the downloadable tracks to be overwhelming in sound, or the teacher-parent duets to be rhythmically different or too different. Many children struggle with listening to the tracks and being able to pace themselves and connect. So this became a really important part to me. So even your best readers, visual students, are either picture or print readers, but they can be overwhelmed by sound. They can be great readers, but they're also the children who struggle with being able to use a metronome because they find it distracting. But even audio students can have the same problem, because we don't necessarily know how much they hear, how fast they pace when they're hearing. So we need to be careful that these things enhance without overwhelming or distracting. Each page has a set of balloons. And this would be my expectation, that they would practice 6 days. So they color these, or they put stickers in them. Some kids will just put check marks, but that needs to start early on. And it's a routine then that they can develop for years to come. Information for me needed to be presented in a user-friendly way. It needed to be concise. We're going to talk and see that in the book. And it was important, again, that we still use seasonal pieces, familiar tunes, titles that capture interest. You know, you have 7 to 15 seconds to capture interest. And so it's really important that we have materials that do that within the books. This is a really interesting fact that I came across in my research. Experts in literacy and child development have discovered that if children know 8 nursery rhymes or songs by heart by the time they are 4 years old, they're usually among the best readers by the time they are 8. And that's a remarkable thing for me. And it speaks to what we want to accomplish in our method book, and that's memory, rhyming, which is also rhythm, concentration, and recall. So by having these memorized, we know they can recall things quickly. If you do songs, it's about tone matching and vocalization, because we've become a whole generation of pianists who think we shouldn't have to sing. Bach and Chopin both expected their students to study voice or sing in a choir. And we've really gotten away from that. I worry it's because of what we test at examinations, but in the early years, if we start this, it's going to be really helpful as they progress through their studies. There's lots of opportunity for students to learn through discovery, which leads to deep learning, meaning it will be with them for life. We have little activity boxes, and we'll look at these in more detail in a minute, but this helps parents with what the task at hand is. And my hope is that it really allows you, the teacher, to observe and learn from the child. Kierkegaard said, instruction begins when you, the teacher, learn from the learner. Put yourself in his place so that you may understand what he learns and the way he understands it. So as I said, the books allow for supplemental materials as needed. You can mix and match this with other series, which I think is important because even in Canada, our theory doesn't always match exactly what they're doing on the page because we have these great programs in our conservatory systems. So I think that's really important. So we do have some companion material that's easy to use. And it is a black and white series. And I just want to spend a little time talking about this because my research kind of surprised me. In the 1980s, we had this whole thing going on in marketing with all of this color being added to the books, and they were so cute. You know, I've tried a million, feels like a million different method series over the years I've taught. When you look at a picture of Mozart and you see the color picture opposed to the line drawing, most of us are naturally drawn to the color picture. And so that tells us where our eyes go before we would even read the statement below that talks about how this is going to impact little people. There's a lot of advantages to it being black and white, one being that it's more cost efficient. The more color, the more expense it's going to be incurred. It also speaks to this idea of impulse buying. These books are really colorful, many of that are on the market, and not that children shouldn't have color materials, but it's more about us opening the book and going, ah, isn't that cute? And forgetting to look at the material that we need to present to progress from week to week to week. And so the impulse buying, like I said, is a marketing ploy, and we need to be careful of that. A black and white book also allows for coloring as an activity, which in turn develops fine motor skills. Children aren't writing as much as they used to, and we need those fine motor skills at the keyboard. That's an important part of what we do. It allows them to personalize their books and make them become really cherished things that they're going to have for the rest of their life. And music is color, so it becomes really important. The color that they choose can also tell you something about the child themselves. If a child is coloring in black consistently, then you might want to address that. I one time had a little boy who was constantly coloring in really dark purple, every week, dark purple, dark purple, dark purple. And he was a very delightful, engaging child. And so what I was seeing wasn't connecting with who he was. So finally, one week I said to him, so next time, I'm just really curious about your color choice. And he said, oh yeah, that's the only crayon I have. And so all the rest of his crayons were broken, were gone. So I learned very quickly that with a black and white book, one of the first things that I give to my students is a small package of crayons so that I know his color choice, Dexter's color choice, isn't dependent on just what's on the shelf at home. But you know what? The one thing that really told me that black and white is an important part of what we're going to do is when you compare it to eye tracking and sensory modality. So this is just a really short summary here, but audio learners tend to track laterally, which of course would be fine with all the color at the top, except that they're not much into reading to begin with. Visual learners, their eyes naturally track up to the outside corners. And so of course, that's where the color is splashed in a method book. So they're going to have difficulty bringing their eyes to the task. Tactile and kinesthetic tend to be very similar, so it's much more random and definitely down and to the right, which is also why if we're going to place an ad in a newspaper or magazine, you might want to ask for it to be in the right-hand corner because it's where we touch the page and turn. So in fact, what this tells us is that if we have colors splashed across the page, when we are trying to teach a new skill, like reading a score, it's going to be very difficult for most children to focus. So the method book itself, for sure, I believe, needs to be black and white with simple drawings. Add the color through coloring and through highlighting and things of that nature. We have several characters that the children become connected to, as with most method books. And this tells us something about our beginners. Children enter kindergarten as kinesthetic and tactual learners, moving and touching everything as they learn. By second or third grade, some students have become visual learners, and during the late elementary years, some students, primarily females, become auditory learners. Yet many adults, especially males, maintain kinesthetic and tactual strengths throughout their lives. And I remember one of my youngest grandson came home with a badge one day, and he was very proud of himself. And when we asked him what it was about, he hadn't touched anyone else's desks or things that entire day. So that was a bonus for him. We know that in often couples, it's when we have an issue with something that needs fixed, we tend to say to husbands, here, can you fix this for us? Because men more often remain kinesthetic and tactual throughout their lives. So these are important facts, but it tells us that the little people that we're going to take in are largely kinesthetic and tactile. And we really want them to be using audio and visual. So these are things that become important in what we're going to do. Disposition is our true self, how we learn, how we communicate, how we behave, and how we work. This is all inborn. It's our natural personal disposition. I'm just going to touch on this. They fall into 5 categories. This is a format that this textbook has been really helpful, and I've adopted their performer, producer, inventor, relator, inspirer, thinker, creator. So those are all people categories that I'm very conscious of in creating and working through these materials. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. In other words, ask, don't tell. Let them process it. Let them process the information, tell you what they're thinking, what they're seeing. Please don't label kids because we are all gifted, average, and slow, depending on the task at hand. So now I've just gone through all of these labels. Those labels are not for the children. They're for us to be able to figure out how they're going to learn best so that we teach to their strengths and strengthen their weaknesses as we grow with them. And you've seen this from me before. This is an order of learning that I've used for years and years. If we think about it, this is how every child learns from the time they're born: hearing, seeing, feeling, repeating, explaining, discussing, and finally reading and writing. Now, by the time they come to us, they're getting ready to read and write as well. But we can use all of these things in our teaching to prepare them and to pre-teach. Don't waste another day believing predominantly Western perspective that thinking and learning occur only between your ears. Children need to move, they need to dance, they need to sing, they need to talk, they need to explain, they need to understand. So all of these things have to happen at our lessons. And creative teachers move beyond the turn the page approach by mixing and matching materials for interesting and stimulating lessons. We think the method book can be like that, where we just keep turning the page. Not true. We have to know our method books, and we have to catch ourselves that we know what's coming, we've prepared them for it, and we're working through it. Early materials need to jumpstart all aspects of learning and allow for you, the teacher, to learn from the child. We're going to talk about the 2A books, We need method books and companion material that allow you to learn from the learner, allow you to observe the child, and then make an educated decision about their course of study. You don't have to be a learning style specialist. I don't think of myself as a learning style specialist, and we don't have to be that to recognize and select methods that actually provide you with that kind of material. And that's what I was focused on, in addition to the progression of what was going to happen. It's a 2-book system. They don't look alike purposely. One is portrait, one is landscape. And that's so that it's less confusing for the visual students, very easy to know which one they're working in. It's more manageable for disorganized kinesthetic students, and inventor dispositions can be very disorganized. It's less overwhelming for the struggling audio reader. So when you have a 4-book system, and I'm not criticizing any method book because I think every series has pros and cons, often as good as the hands they're in, right? And so I think we need to recognize that for some children, the 4 books look identical. They don't purposely forget to bring one. They don't purposely forget to do something within one. They just don't identify them individually, and creates problems for some learning styles. So that takes you to the end of the page 5 in your handout. And after that, what I've shared with you is my handout that I use for my certification course for this, for Let's Begin. So it's filled with all kinds of information. You're going to be following along the slides. And just what I want to point out to you is philosophy, approaches, and why something is the way it is in our level 1 book now. So children and parents do not come to us music lesson ready. We need to develop strategies that assist the musical language and concepts. So one of the first things that's really important in a method book is there's enough white space that your child can focus. And within all of the 4 books, you're going to find activity boxes, and these are designed for all learning styles. They love the clarity, they love the simplicity, and they can really assist with the focus that's needed to happen for the task at hand. They also really help organize the student, but also assist both parent and teachers, basically giving the teachers a lesson plan of what you want to cover within this, with very simple, direct instructions. You're going to also see these listening boxes. Audio learners love the listening games that we have. Visual learners may struggle more with this, as we know, and they often have to be given very creative images that they can visualize. So in this case, I happened to choose something that included the snowflakes. So these are things that will really help a visual learner with audio development. The listening games will be done at lessons, but families are encouraged to play these games at home with the student, and encourage them to trade places so that the teacher becomes the student and so on. So you do role playing, which will really help understand the student's comprehension of the topic. All the boxes have rounded edges, which you just look up and it's just very soft, but it's to avoid a harsh or clinical look within the book. The balloons are there to color. And of course, students are encouraged to sing along or count out loud. So using the voice is what internalizes sound, which we need throughout their studies and throughout their musical career. Visual learners are either, as I mentioned, print or picture learners. So that means they turn pictures into information, or they require really simple language, short sentences. So I have opted to almost entirely have 1 sentence, very succinct language per line. So it's really easy for them if they are already reading. Use highlighters in this book. Let the students use the highlighters within this book and highlight the key points that work for that child. So I've just highlighted one here. Tactile students need to touch the page. That's why the practice balloons are important. That's why using a highlighter becomes really important for these children. The activity boxes, visual and kinesthetic learners love lists, and they can be numbered or they can be checklists, but they're really into that sort of thing. Thinker, creator, disposition, that they are attracted to the creative ideas. So the things like, what does high mean? What does low mean? And that's a whole problem for us. I'm not going to delve into that today. I'm going to save some of those ideas for the second part. But even using birds, animals, that's a great connection for kids. And this, of course, this one uses thunderstorm as well. So your creative people are going to be really connected to that. And you want to match your language. I keep saying this, but soft to some children will be more about touch and feel, especially a tactile learner. So we need to know if soft sounds need to be translated to something else. So you might say, again, asking the question, if you spoke in a soft voice, what would that sound like? So now we want to ask them what it sounds like, so we know exactly what that is. Now, at this point, you don't necessarily know what kind of learner they are, so this question becomes important for every child. But we need to make sure that the language is working for that child. Audio learners are attracted to the creative sounds, but they're the ones who just want to play. They're the ones who play all the time. They're the ones who drive us crazy because they're playing while you're trying to talk to them. They just like sounds. Tactile learners can be guilty of that as well. And at the bottom of each page, where it's time to use a creative learning paper, we cross-reference this. So I've just highlighted that. I'm not going to talk about that immediately, but that's going to happen throughout the book. You know that you can go online and grab all of these great coloring pictures now. So you can find big birds and little birds, take them to the table so you can talk about this. Remember the hearing, seeing, feeling, repeating, explaining, discussing, all of those things become really important. So we can talk about the birds while they're doing a little coloring, which is building fine motor skills at the same time. Turn this into whole body learning. So this is like, again, like pre-teaching. So you move, you imitate, you act out the birds, you act out the bird sounds, then go to the piano and allow the child to discover what their perception of these birds might be. So if the big bird ends up in the middle rather than where you hope at the lower levels, then you just need to work through that with the child. So take the time to learn how the child understands the concept. We know what answers and perceptions we want them to have, but don't impose that information. They need to discover it by comparison, by you leading them on this expedition. Learn from the learner, use the child's language, and then manipulate the information into intelligent musical understanding. Ask questions, constantly ask questions, and use every page to the fullest. So in this case, we were just doing big birds and little birds. So at some point, you want to take that. So this will be repetition now, where you come back to this concept and talk about, so what would be a middle-sized bird and where would you make that sound on the piano? So you need to constantly review, constantly repeat, and progress or evolve the information. This next page is about the handout creative learning sheets. So we know that we need to teach to the students disposition and sensory modality, but we also know that we need to increase their skill level in the other areas and try to bridge the gap to where their weaknesses might be. We also know that we need to have tools that help us do that so that they're at our fingertips. So this package of papers actually develop skills, everything from rhythm, improvisation, signs, oral skills, large and small, muscle function, and just general music language. There's 5 pages, loose pages within this, and they cover 5 topics. So there's 5 finger plays, which we use for fine motor skills, developing technique, rhythm, rhyming, listening, memory, hand designation, finger numbers, all of those things. The whole body is getting them off the bench and strengthening through large and small muscle still. But again, same kind of things, rhythm, rhyming, encouraging visual and audio students to get up and visual, yes, I said that right, to move. and getting them off the bench. As we know, we already said, these little people already come to us, kinesthetic and tactile. So visual and audio students are going to benefit from this just as much as the students who can't sit still. So this becomes really important. We have visual sheets that focus on strengthening and developing musical images that they will need to know. We have listening games, which will really attract the audio learners, but we need to make sure the others are involved in this as well. And we have 5 improvisational sheets. So this will allow them to continue with keyboard geography development, listening skills, creativity, and even fine motor skills. It's a loose package, and the idea is that that appeals to their interest or intrigue, surprise. We have teachers tell me often that the students come in wanting to know what their next page looks like that they're going to get. So just an interesting approach to what they're doing. And it also allows you as a teacher, if you need to go through more of the fine motor skills initially, so the finger plays, then you don't have to do the 1 through 25. The finger plays are numbered 1 through 5, just as the whole body are numbered 1 through 5. So you can, again, here's one of these things where you're mixing and matching how you use this as well. It is cross-referenced in the method book, but you can always work ahead within it. So here's a sample of the first 3. This open them, shut them is fine motor skills. So this is a finger play. And the second one is a whole body one, which is clap your hands, stomp your feet, basically combining whole body and fine motor skills within this. And the third one that's recommended for that page that we just left in the method book is audio. So we're using animal sounds. Animal sounds is one of the best places to help students learn to move their voices. So the growlers, when we get those, this is a really great opportunity. And the children are interested in animals. If you're looking for interesting topics, you can count on animals, food, stars, special occasions, but you'll never go wrong with that. So I refer to these as refrigerator challenges, and I encourage my kids to post these on the refrigerator and challenge their family that before you open the refrigerator door, you have to walk through these things. And most families get really into it, and the kids get excited about doing these with their family. And it's just a really great support that they create. Can you see on this page how we're using language to our benefit? Words like exploring, attract students. It has a powerful impact to what they want to do. Students here will be able to look at their instrument and work through. You'll get a sense of what the student is doing, what kind of instrument they're playing on, because we've all had those experiences, I'm sure, where we realize they don't have an appropriate instrument at home. If it's a great-grandma's instrument, we know how old and tired great-grandma might be, so maybe the instrument's the same, but we need to work on that. Your audio students will love to explore the sound on this page. Your tactile and kinesthetic students will be just wishing they could take the whole thing apart and put it back together, as will your inventors. And they'll be touching and feeling everything. But interestingly, you may find that your visual students are actually holding back. They may need to be encouraged to touch and play. So it'll help you understand also how the child learns by looking at that. And we start to build language. I'll just keep moving quickly through. You can see I've highlighted some of these terms: touching, the pedal, exploring the pedal is learning through discovery, letting them have a great time with this. And of course, you're going to learn more about the instrument the child is playing on. As with most books, we have a posture check that we repeat often. Francis Clark said this: "I never stop emphasizing a good playing position, no matter how advanced a student becomes." Students are going to be reminded throughout the series to work on their posture check, because they come to us in many sizes and shapes. They grow very quickly. Their muscles mature differently. So it's important that we continue to come back to that. Again, the numbered list, this is really helpful to kinesthetic and visual learners. They love charts, graphs, and lists. Tactile learners need to put pen to paper. That's really important. That's a need for them. It helps organize both audio and kinesthetic learners, and performers and creators love this kind of process. And I'm not going to go through the details on that, but it's all there. We've included a finger play as well in here. Again, finger plays, I can't emphasize this enough, develop language, fine motor skills, technique, memory, rhythm, hand designation, finger numbers, hand-eye coordination, hand position and motion, rhyming, concentration, following of instructions, and creativity. This is a great little proverb. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. So that's again why it's important for them to discover. There's the cross-reference again to the creative papers. Not every child has clearly defined hand designation when we get them. Left-handed children tend to be more delayed than the naturally right-handed students. Tracing is a really great exercise for them to do with the help of the teacher, and discussing then how their hands are mirror images. It's telling us more about the numbers. I tend to, again, use highlighters here. I would trace the right hand in red and then left hand in blue. I also use that idea where the left hand can form the L. The idea here is that red and right start with the same R. I can then, for children who are struggling or very young, put little, the little stationary circles that you can buy in different colors, put red on the back of their right hand, blue on the back of their left hand, and we can really help them with all of that. And then pretty soon they can imagine what it looks like as well. And students remember information better when they find it themselves through discovery. That's something Nancy Telfer talks about all the time. So this exercise is about becoming more familiar with the keyboard, zooming up to the high notes, zooming down to the low notes, and using language like that, where we zoom up to the high, down to the left, to the low. And then again, the activity box is creating improvisation, basically, allowing them to explore that. So we start to understand what they know about high and low sounds. Teaching from the inside out is so important to me. So I've opted to use twins and triplets because even young children identify with twins and triplets. You can see how the language here is paralleling lowest to reach the highest, and how many sets of twins, let them discover that. And a page on hand position, because I separate posture and hand position because the one is gross muscle, one is fine motor skills. We know that the natural hand position is like when one is walking. Normally, there's a slight bend in the fingers. It's a relaxed curve. The muscles do not tire when we do that. And that's really what we're looking for at the keyboard. And so that's what we're walking them through here. And I haven't used real hand images here because I want them to find their own natural hand shape with our direction, of course. I reinforce this hand position through the use of black key repertoire for a more natural shape. It's easier to get that going. We also start with just the strongest fingers, the longest and strongest, 2, 3, and 4. We do lots of play, lots of discovery, exploration with improvisation, and rote playing. And the one thing you just have to watch out for is don't let the thumb drop straight down. You want to keep it curved in under the hand. And so to this point, a number of children will be capable of getting to this point in the first lesson, but some will only accomplish a few pages, and that's okay. The idea is you go as far as you feel the child is not easily handling what we've discussed and what we've been doing. You need to send them home with something that they're playing, and just always make sure that every dot has been touched on, regardless of how quickly they can move. So getting into repertoire, you're going to see the strong visuals that we have. Language plays a huge role. And again, I keep saying this, but you want to match your language to the child. That's going to help them connect to you. And we've tried to do that within the method book. So Bigfoot, Tactile students especially will connect to that because they need a gut reaction, while kinesthetic will see the emotion in that. I'm using words that will connect. So just as an example, kinesthetic will also connect with words like stomping. Audio learners will love words like stomping, but also laughing. Words like down and up I use throughout. Right hand, left hand show up just to give some word connection, basically a word painting type of approach. And also assume that, be careful, some children assume that right to left means you're ascending because that's how the keyboard works. And if they've had any experience, sometimes that's already locked in. So you have to be careful of that. You can turn these pages sideways, you can turn your keyboard sideways. If you do cardboard keyboards like this, where you can lay them out on your keyboard and then pick them up from the top and they can see how it's moving. So direction, if that's a problem, can be worked out easily for young students. But if you turn the page sideways, then the arrow is pointing toward the left. So if this is turned sideways, the right hand is moving from right to left instead of left to right up the keyboard. Using lots of animal themes as well, so that we will see students connect. Always teaching from the known to the unknown. So we'll talk about this in detail, but on each page here, if you can just quickly skim through that, you'll see how we have so many known elements, and then we have one, possibly two new elements when we come to the next piece. And I'm very systematic about that, very committed to that. Too many new elements will just create issues for the children. So here's one of our listening games showing up. Here's a couple of sample pages that I've given you on the type of rote playing that I would do, even though I've set this one up to be fingers 3, 2, 3, and 4. You could also do this with a single finger, and that's what the little checklists do. Sometimes individual fingers need to be supported by the thumb to get going on these, but I'm sure you have tons of pieces that you can teach by rote. I've just given you a couple of examples here on what you can do with this. One of our next pieces, what's new is alternating hands, and we've taken the arrows that we're pointing out the directions. That's how minimal it is with new concepts on each page. One of the best parallel books, which we already talked about, was actually the Northern Lights pre-reader. And in your handout, I've isolated which ones actually correspond to the pages within the Let's Begin as well. So you'll be able to find that. And of course, Northern Lights is in 100% Canadian composers. So again, a title that appeals to kinesthetic learners, great visuals. There's your practice balloons, really easy to use. I want to talk really quickly about this piece, because this is a place that you can really learn from the child. This piece tends to get played in this fashion. Some will play it this way, while others will play it. Sorry. So some will naturally play it in triple rhythm, while others will play it in straight quarter notes. And what happens is then we can start to look at the child and go, okay, so what does this mean? Students who played in triple meter are probably your dancers and athletes, kinesthetic, highly audio. So they have a strong sense of rhythm to begin with. The child who plays it in straight quarters is more apt to be more visual and perhaps more tactile, just doing what they see on the page. So you're starting to learn what rhythm is going to be like for them. And that's followed by introducing basic rhythm. So within our books, we do quarter note, half note, dotted half note, and whole note. No rests are showing at this point. Activity boxes can start to be really creative. So use every page to the fullest, take this page once it's completed as a written exercise, and have them improvise on it in this rhythm, and they can do whatever they want. So it's very creative. Also some no-fail teaching. This activity box sets them up for success with finding the middle key twins. I've done many festivals where the students get up and count little people to the center of the keyboard. And I just love seeing that, because what it tells me is that that teacher has set them up for success. And you can see, so basically we're learning about the middle key twins here, and they learning to play a skip. So minimal amounts, another animal. You can see how simple the accompaniments are, adding more rhythm information and having an activity page, which you probably should do at the keyboard. Improvisation is coming into play. Animal characters again. And it's really important that we keep familiar tunes in these books. Performers relators love this. Kids get a response from this. Audio learners love to sing along. Tactile learners have a connection to it. And kinesthetic learners may react more with wanting to dance to it or create motions. But what we know is that these old familiar tunes really are just as new to students today as they were to us. Don't ignore these little gems. Change the lyrics if you need to, but don't be intimidated that you have to use something different, or titles that just kids love, like Stuck in Bed. I want to take another couple of minutes just to talk about the connection and how we run into sort of black holes. And teaching from the unknown to the unknown is so important to me. Many method books, and check out what you're using, move directly from all black keys to all white keys, and this can be a challenge for many children. So here's the piece that the students have played, and we're going to start to move to white keys. We've already done a written page where we're starting to introduce the musical alphabet, but we're using exactly the same black keys as we had in Merrily We Roll Along. We're adding only E. This is a middle C method series, which tends to be more musical because we can have more complete melodies. But typically we don't start with the A, which is the musical alphabet, A to E in this case. We start with middle C, and whoever decided that also was maybe the person who decided that piano lessons are 30 minutes, which generally don't work. But if we just drop the fourth finger on the E and keep everything else the same, we can now start to move toward a really cool little piece. Same finger, same motion, and we're adding one white key with the security blanket of what they know as the black keys. And so we can just progress in that way. Here's using Galaxy ideas for our material, written material. The activity pages really are designed to be see and do, meaning that the child can look at it and understand what's required. And musical alphabet, of course, is brought into play. And by the time we add E, then they understand that then these three will be C, D, E. So we just bring the right hand down to the white keys on C, D, E. We keep the same three black keys in the left hand. So here's the connection. And now we have the whole tone scale. And we can discover and experiment with the pedal at the same time. And we transition gradually then onto white key non-staff reading. I'm just going to zip through these as you see how we're building our information. We've added the interval of the fourth here on page 40. It's one of the most difficult intervals for a small child to play. So I've introduced it as shared between hands, and we'll deal with it when the hands are a little bit stronger in a single hand position. And we complete the alphabet. Some more improvisation showing here. This is just giving you some more sample papers. We have improvisation in the Royal Count in the method book, so it's still showing up there as well. Completing the 5-finger pattern for middle C, and even getting into 5-finger pattern in C position, and that will allow us to start some 5-finger exercises. So I just want to get through this. We're almost at the end here. So showing you how we introduce the staff, and we need to take time to talk about lines and spaces, making sure the child understands. So again, good example, matching language. Hockey players know that to score a goal, that puck has to cross the line. So a line note is one that where the puck would stop on the line, easy suggestion. And a space, it's like putting yourself in a bunk bed. So you have to cuddle top and bottom, and you're inside that. So we need to use language like that to make sure they recognize that. Also, we use the G clef information right from the start, signpost reading by only playing G, and of course, tracing the treble clef. And their first piece on staff uses only 2 signpost notes, middle C and treble G. Activity pages for writing, do the same thing again with the bass clef. So we're really clear, establishing signpost reading before we leave. And we spend a very short period of time on single staff reading, as you see with the bass clef middle C song, because we need to get into vertical reading pretty quickly at the piano. Horizontal reading is fairly easy, but vertical reading can be a challenge. So we move fairly quickly, but we take the time to pace ourselves through that to understand treble and bass. But then the grand staff comes into play fairly quickly to get the vertical reading that's going to happen. Even though it's not hands together, we're still having to do this kind of thing. So it doesn't feel horizontal as when it's single staff. So the final piece is just playing these 2 old friend signpost notes. Of course, it's a little certificate. These are just a few more samples of the creative learning papers. This one, the high-low, is a listening game where we're using animal sounds again to help us. This is more what the visual papers look like, where they're doing written visual things, creating little flashcards within that. And of course, improvisation, so that they have that always going on with their general learning as they're progressing through the book. So that was a zoom through. I'm going to stop sharing now, but a very quick pass through the level A.
Okay, very nice. Hey, everyone, let's get some questions going here for Deb. I know that's a lot of material and a really thorough method, obviously, well thought out in so much detail. That in itself is a piano pedagogy masterclass right there from the ground up. So thanks, Deb, for that. As always, this recording is going to be well watched later, I'm sure. So questions, anyone? And in the meantime, I just appreciate the sense of learning styles and how you've thought through those different learning styles and how they can be incorporated under one cover, which is really, really great.
Thank you.
And also, is anyone in the audience today, if any of you tried the method or you're using it already, you know, if we have a testimonial here, I think that would be really great. A couple things, Deb, when it comes to using the thumbs, it seems like when you finally get to the white keys, then the need is there to start using the thumbs. Is that when it first gets introduced?
It first gets introduced at the keyboard, but it's going to get introduced in the finger plays well before that.
Right.
And so we can develop just the action more slowly, but the finger plays become really prominent in developing that technique and control. And so we can already be watching in those finger plays what their thumbs actually are doing. So that's an observation you want to have. And I should mention too that when you get to the finger plays where you're doing right hand, left hand designation as well, then make sure you're standing beside them and not in front of them.
Right.
So simple little thing, but you know, we just forget some of those things at times.
Yeah. And then do you have any specific suggestions for using the thumb, encouraging proper thumb placement, or are you of the mind like myself where you just try to let things develop naturally in the young hand?
Yeah, I want them to develop naturally, but I don't want to leave them entirely to their own devices. There is a finger play for Tommy Thumb, and what we do there is they actually start where they're actually swinging them into play and bringing them back out, so they understand this motion. And as I said in the presentation, when you're doing the 3 black keys, watch that the thumb is not dropping straight down. We don't want to get that habit. Just trying to have this natural shape that they've walked around and found, right? Mm-hmm. So that's largely where I go with that. That's about as far as I go initially, and just keep an eye on it, because we all know that we all use what we have, our tools. So how our thumb works and patterns under, a general sort of regime is different. It depends on the size, it depends on the skill, it depends on the shape of the hand. So we have a plan in place of what we want the hand to look like, but we need to let it be natural as well. Mm-hmm. So I tend to watch and just work on making sure they understand this motion of going under more than anything. Mm-hmm. And then as we develop the crossovers, it changes as well, right?
Right.
Did I answer that question?
I think so. No, absolutely. Yeah. A couple of testimonies here. We'll give Deb a break for a sec so she can recover. Her voice is doing very well, but recovering.
Thank you.
In the comments, Tenley saying, I've been using the series for years and can't say enough about the value to beginning students on so many levels, so well researched and presented. That's great to hear. And then Aldis, this has been very helpful and useful. Most of my students are young beginners, so this is relevant for my current teaching. And then someone else is saying, really like the way the white notes are gradually introduced from the black notes, which brings me to one of my other questions, and that is about pacing. Let's say for the average 7-year-old coming into Let's Begin, into Book A, how long, if they're rehearsing regularly 5 or 6 days a week with the help of a parent, how long do you think roughly it would take them to get from black notes onto white notes in this method?
It's relatively quick if they're working every day. So in almost, and maybe we need to go back to someone like Tenley to ask her what she's experiencing, but I think that a quick pacing for 7 or even an 8-year-old, they can be almost through this book in the first semester. So they need all of what's there, but we can allow them to pace really quickly. So I'm thinking, I really feel that by mid-semester, a bright 7-year-old who's working every day is moving there very quickly. I don't hold back if they can move that fast. I think it's really important. I do think you might want to supplement the material so that we're sure that they're getting enough. Mm-hmm. And that's why I mentioned that Northern Lights book. But a 5-year-old, it's a different story. It's going to take much longer for them to get there and develop the muscle control. Right. But I don't know, Tenley, do you want to mention to us about that?
So
the whole thing of gradually going to the white keys, when I started really looking and analyzing method books, I was surprised at how many go right from all black to all white, and how many children really plateau at that moment because of that. Mm-hmm. We're surprised, I guess we shouldn't be, but why that happens, but they have no anchors, they have no known element. So now all of a sudden they're trying to progress through these white keys with no security blanket.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. If anyone has a question they want to come on and ask live, just hit the raise your hand feature in your menu buttons in Zoom, and we can bring you on live to ask, even without video, with or without video, but you would be able to ask your questions over audio. And in the meantime, Stacy's asking, how well does this translate to online lessons?
Lots of people, of course, were using it online. And I think the one challenge would be wanting to have the parent there, I think, for the finger plays, so that they're comfortable with doing that, or with the creative learning sheets, or when they're doing the written pages together, because I think at this level A, probably B, you want to do the written pages with them. So they would need support with that, but otherwise I think it works as well as any other method. And we all discovered that through COVID, that we learned how to do that. Parents can go and download the free downloads. So even the little songs in the creative papers, so that Sweetly Sings the Donkey, there's a free download for that, so that there's an accompaniment there, so you can sing and play together, so parents can go and download that material as well. So it's available to them. But I think I know that in Tenley's case, she was using it in that situation. So and many people were. So
very good. Okay, so that brings us to about the end here today. I'm not seeing any other questions at this point. We're going to continue in 2 weeks. This is just a good overview. And what can we expect in 2 weeks' time? Where do you want to take it from here for us in part 2 of this presentation?
Oh, part 2, I'm just going to take out sample pages of the next books to demonstrate how we accomplish all of the things that I'm talking about to prepare them for grade 1. I'm going to give you some ideas on how to problem solve a few things that we experienced, like the whole keyboard issue of what's up and what's down, because the keyboard is totally confusing when it comes to that. We'll look at a few more of the supplemental things, because as we advance through, we also add some theory books that are not dependent on the method book, but offer some really great opportunities. So it's going to be more specific to just how we progress, because now hopefully you understand my approach to all of the learning styles. I'm not going to be talking about that as much because it's kind of a given that is how it progressed. You're going to see, I think you're going to love to see the things like the activity pages, the approach to harmonization and things like that that happen, and where we land at the end of level 4, which is the D book.
Right. Okay. So lots more to look forward to, a lot more questions. We look forward to this in about 2 weeks' time. Again, the handout, everyone, we'll have that in the YouTube description so that anyone can download that handout anytime. It's well over 80 pages. And knowing Deb will have at least another 75-page handout here in 2 weeks' time to take you through all of this so you can see the slideshow notes and trigger the memory of everything that she's been talking about. So thanks for doing that and putting so much effort into this. As always, Deb, it's a real resource and a real pleasure to have you here on CCTV.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, we'll see.